Hello and welcome everybody back to the HotCuppaTV podcast, and I would like to say today a very warm welcome to each and every single one of you guys who are amazing supporters of this channel and who are, or if you're just visiting for the first time, or if you're just clicking here onto this podcast, come and chill out, to hang out, to relax and to listen. I would like to say amazing to have you all on here. So yeah, take a sip of your hot, delicious beverage. As you could probably see, if you are listening to this on YouTube, indeed watching it, you will be able to see that the little graphic art for this podcast is actually a cup that is animated. It's got the steam coming out of it, and it's an animated cup there. It looks absolutely beautiful. It looks elegant, if I do say so myself, with the HotCuppaTV logo on there. So that is indeed the HotCuppaTV logo, but animated, and a special thanks does go to Haphazardous Waste for that. So I do have to say that yes, it's thanks to a lot of you guys' support and help that things on this channel have become so beautiful, has become so amazing, and it's partly the reason why I can keep all of this going. So I did want to say, I really appreciate you all, you guys. I'm in such a great mood today. Today we're actually going to be delving into podcasting. So the kind of main topic of this podcast is podcast itself. So yeah, we are on episode 4 now, and I hope you guys have enjoyed episode 3 with our very first guest delving into Halo there, one of our old classic games. And as I described previously, this podcast will be surrounding a lot of guests, but also things like tech, as well as gaming. So we are going to be discussing the tech industry, the gaming industry, and even the social media world in general, guys. And that's where podcasts comes into this. There has been a huge boom in podcast in this recent decade. I mean, if you think about it, the history of this media has gone all the way back before to radio and television. So, before podcasts even came about. Indeed, the very first podcasts were made because of the Apple iPod, right? Apple as a tech company has been so instrumental in bringing us these technologies, these breakthrough technologies such as the iPhone. If before that, remember, there wasn't really ever a smartphone. We were using things like Blackberries, we were using outdated technology and phones that didn't have connection to the internet and never really ran apps, So now we have access to all of these worlds in our pocket. Almost everyone listening to this podcast, if you are in, especially if you are in America, England, in the Western world, but if you are in China, in India, or in Russia, any part of the world, you are connected. You are connected online to the internet, and you are probably connected from a mobile phone. Did you know, guys, that around about 75% of my audience or more, guys, consume this YouTube content on their smartphones? So indeed, not many people are using computers anymore. They're not so old-fashioned like me. I use my phone a lot, always, everywhere I go. However, I'm using my computer loads, guys. I'm using it every single day, of course, to do my work, which is, of course, videography and photography, and creating videos on YouTube. But yeah, it's interesting to see how everybody uses technologies and how, of course, technology advances. So with the advent of the iPhone came, breakthrough devices like the iPod, and the iPod actually came first. But, after that, lots of podcasts started springing up and becoming published online. That were now available to everyone, for everyone to access. They weren't just available through, commercial radio stations anymore, or you didn't have to buy expensive Sky packages to go and watch these kind of long form, talk shows on TV. You could actually get them through podcasts. And this is one of the amazing things I think about, that why I love podcasts so much. And why I'm bringing you this. And in this podcast, I want to jump in right now to talking about what's happened in the most latest advances. So now we have podcasts in all kinds of, genres. We have the tech genre, we have gaming genre, pretty much any genre you can think of, there are podcasts in, like, for example, parenting and pregnant women. There's like podcasts about that, or there's podcasts about arts and crafts, right? Or there's podcasts about mental issues, and there's podcasts about the fitness community. Any type of niche or at all that you can imagine, there's podcasts covering that. And I did want to talk about a little for a second in this podcast how I do want this to be a broader generalized theme, as well as the gaming and tech that we already have. I do want to be discussing things like current events and things like that, of course, in this podcast, which you guys are probably figured out already that we are going to be covering all kinds of things. And one of the latest current events has been in the podcasting world, in our developing tech kind of our online YouTube community world, is that Joe Rogan, of course, has just sold his podcasts for 100 million, which is the biggest podcast in the world, in case you guys don't know. Well, it's the biggest one on YouTube, probably one of the top 3 or 5 in the whole world. He's actually sold that podcast. So he's gone ahead and sold it for 100 million pounds. When I say sold it, what I mean is it's still his podcast, but he's done an exclusive deal with Spotify, and Spotify have bought him out, which actually means that those podcasts will no longer be available on YouTube. Now, I watch all kinds of podcasts. In fact, I brought up a list here. The different podcasts I listen to, which I explained in one of the previous episodes, guys, for example, tech podcasts that I listen to are MKBHD, which is Marcus Brownlee on YouTube, one of the biggest tech YouTubers, and Unbox Therapy is one of the biggest YouTubers. I listen to MKBHD's podcast. So yes, I listen to currently MKBHD. I'm listening to Lou Later, which is a tech podcast. I'm listening to quite a lot of different business podcasts. I'm actually bringing up the list here because I just wanted to let you guys know what I'm subscribed to. I'm listening to a specialized Minecraft podcast, which is called The Spawn Chunks, a gaming careers podcast. In terms of gaming, that's mainly the podcast I'm listening to. In terms of tech, there's Lou Later. There is Waveform from MKBHD. There is Noise Cancelling from, I think that's Tech Radar's podcast, for example. And then there's also the Pocket Now weekly podcast. There's Grant Cardone, Stephen Stephan, Gary Vee I listen to a lot, Dave Ramsey's show, which is a finance podcast, Craig Ballantyne's podcast, Think Media's podcast, who help influencers to grow on YouTube and give video growth advice tips, and the Coaching Business podcast. So I listen to mainly podcasts about growing your business, growing on YouTube, the latest up-to-date technology in the tech world, and also gaming, some gaming, fun and entertaining gaming podcasts. So yeah, we all have our podcasts that we listen to, but this thing about Joe Rogan as well, sometimes I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast and he has some seriously in-depth and amazing episodes sometimes, because he can bring on guests that not everyone can, access, which is people, for example, like Elon Musk. Excuse me. And I don't know if you guys, I am assuming that a lot of you who are listening to this have obviously listened to that Elon Musk podcast. It's just so popular. I think it's already on 10. It's like reaching 10 million views now. He's actually done a second one with Elon Musk recently, which is amazing. But on that, he's talking about the advancements of AI, artificial intelligence, and where it's going in the future for our smart devices, for our smartphones, when we're going to be using things like the Google Assistant and Siri, and how advanced they're going to be. How smart they're going to be able to pre-plan our decisions for us and do all kinds of things that we can't imagine and fathom right now. It's amazing the direction that technology is going in. So yeah, Joe Rogan sold his podcast anyway. He's gone ahead and sold out to Spotify for 100 million. Amazing. I'm happy for him because obviously, he's now rich for life, basically. But his what that means is for YouTube, the YouTube platform, his podcast unfortunately will not be available for us anymore on this platform. You will only be able to get them on Spotify. I think starting from September this will be. So they have a transition period. But the fact is that corporations in this modern age are actually buying out podcasts now. Podcasts are becoming more in demand. More people are listening to them, especially the bigger and more popular podcasts. And it's just a very interesting space, because considering 10 years ago we never really had podcasts. We had radio and stuff like that. So, and television, and now, you can access podcasts mainly for free on these online platforms. But it's interesting to see all the different tech companies, the biggest ones like Apple, Google, YouTube, and Spotify and Netflix, all these big companies competing for the biggest influencers now. So the biggest influencers such as Joe Rogan and the biggest characters in the space are getting continuously bought out. This reminds me of a deal that happened recently with a massive corporation, as you all will know, as Twitch is the biggest gaming streaming platform, even bigger than YouTube right now in terms of streaming, right? So although it is in massive competition to YouTube, but the thing is yeah, I mean, corporations are more monopolizing this whole space, this online space, and it makes you think how many other YouTubers are going to get bought out, especially the biggest ones here. We're talking about the biggest influencers, the biggest vloggers, the biggest podcasters, and the biggest people who have lots of advertising revenue and space on their content for ads, like huge podcasts like Joe Rogan, and how they're going to be bought out over the next few years, and how more and more corporations are going to try and, claim certain influencers to try and obviously increase their business and grow their brand into the biggest brands. And then we're gonna have this massive brand competition battle. I've always wondered one day, out of Google, Apple and Samsung, who are arguably the three biggest right now, and Amazon, which one of those companies are gonna perhaps crumble in the end, because one of them is going to run away with it eventually. Like at the moment, it's only at the very start of the internet space, right? We've had the internet existing for not so long right now, and we're still in the very, very early beginning infant phases of the whole of the tech space, the social media space, and the internet world in the last 20 years of where its potential is going, and what's going to happen to it, and in terms of which are the biggest companies. Tech is clearly the biggest global industry in terms of money right now, because it profits. The tech companies make more than governments. Quite literally, like these are. The top entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook, and all of the Steve Jobs, of course, for Apple, and all of the big CEOs for the big tech companies are the richest people on the planet. Far richer than even Donald Trump and like the US presidents. So it's just amazing. It's how the tech space is running away with things, and it's still at the very beginning. So yeah, like I say, I can't wait to see where it goes in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Is there going to be one big company that ends up, taking over them all? I don't think so, because Apple, Samsung, and of course Google are at this particular moment equally as huge conglomerates, and all I could see is a potential, meshing together of two of them, because they're so different and they're so in competition with each other at the moment, that eventually they may realize that there may be more money in it for the two of them if they team up and stuff and do certain things together. Indeed, they already are doing certain things together right now. But yeah, so in terms of podcasts, I really am excited to see what happens in the space in the future. We're only in the beginning of professional podcasts. Like any influencer can start a professional podcast now, right? Indeed, I'm starting this podcast, for example, and I can immediately I'm actually going to be trying to put this podcast onto all of the podcast platforms, guys. I believe this is going to be possible, but I'm just going to have to figure it out. I want to make my first 10 or 20 episodes first, but then eventually I will spread this HotCuppaTV podcast onto all of the main podcast platforms. That's great for you guys as well, because it means that if you listen to this podcast regularly, you'll be able to listen to it on your favorite podcast platform like I do. My favorite platform happens to be Google, because I just use Google for everything. So it kind of syncs in very well with my mobile phone and all of the services I already currently use. But we'll be spreading this to hopefully Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. We're getting it onto Anchor and Diesel, and even hopefully SoundCloud as well. So we'll have to see how that works out. But yeah, it will just be amazing. And this is a podcast that has a lot of potential, guys. We can talk to. We've already had our first guest on, which is actually one of my friends. I want to have a few more of my friends onto this in the future, but people who I find that you guys might resonate with, that you guys might be able to get some sort of value from and find it interesting. But other gamers, other YouTubers in this space, talking to eventually bigger and bigger influencers eventually in the future. Who knows? Getting them on to talk about all things that are related to HotCuppaTV, whether that's the dinosaur community, whether that is the Minecraft community, whether that is the gaming community or the tech community in general. It's really exciting to see where all this goes. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think that Joe Rogan's £100 million podcast deal is a good thing for the future of podcasts and influencers in general? Do you think that influencers will be able to have more brand deals by being exclusive with certain platforms in the future? Or just let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your general thoughts about podcasts and podcasting. In my opinion, it has a lot of potential, but I'm not doing this particular podcast for any reason like that. Like, I'm making this podcast because I've always loved, just talking to people. As you guys could already tell, I love on this channel, expressing everything that I put on this channel are my passions. I never make a videos or a series on this channel, guys, that is not something that I love, right? Because I know that there's certain people who prefer certain stuff. Like, for example, we have many Jurassic fans on this channel, and I'm not forcing myself to do only Jurassic content, because that would be wrong, right? That would be against what I love. I love Jurassic content, but I also love Minecraft. I love City Skylines, and I love podcasts and making my own podcast shows. I even like vlogs, to be honest, and you guys will be seeing some vlogs on this channel eventually. But I like Pokemon, I like things like that. And so I'm giving myself the chance to express all my passions on this channel, which is going to be my passions in the gaming section and the tech section. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy every piece of content here on the HotCuppaTV channel, and especially these podcasts. And thank you all so much for joining us here today. Let me have a sip of this coffee. Yeah, I felt excited about this podcast, so I just had to make it, I thought it was a nice little interesting rant about the modern tech age and podcasting here today. So I hope you all have enjoyed, and let me know, about give me ideas, guys, as well. I already have unlimited ideas about things that we're going to discuss. I mean, we have so many individual games that we can go through here on the future of this podcast. We have tech subjects we could discuss. We could do one whole podcast about Elon Musk. Let me know if you guys would enjoy that, where we talk about all the different companies he's got, and why they're interesting, and indeed why mostly that they are so important for all of us here in this modern, tech world that we're living in. For example, the advent of his Tesla company, because it's an electric car company. It's the first real global company in the world to push the whole automobile industry forwards, to push us into having electric cars, and supercars in the future that have zero problem with global warming or producing emissions. That's amazing. And not only that, these cars have literally everything integrated into them. You don't even open the door, guys. You just walk. When you're next to the car, the door automatically opens and pulls out a red carpet for you to walk along, and then it literally picks you up. The car has a robotic arms that pick you up off of the floor and place you into the car, into the driver's seat. You don't even have to walk anymore. That's what's going to happen in these future cars. They're going to read our minds, and they're going to do all of the hard work for us. The car then proceeds to auto-drive itself to your desired destination, whilst hand feeding you the latest social media news, and automatically playing a podcast of your desired choice on the way to your destination. Because guys, artificial intelligence is going to bring us so many more potential exciting revolutions and innovations to our industry in the future than we can even believe possible. And Elon Musk has actually talked about this a lot, about the certain things that we can implement in the future, like Neuralink, where technology and AI reads our brains directly through a Neuralink transmitter chip that can be placed inside of our bodies, right? Which is already being a technology which has been proven and has already been working on for numerous years now. And that's actually an industry that he's invested in. He's invested into the Neuralink technology industry, so he'll be pushing that industry forwards. And he also had what else was it? It was cars, Neuralink, and batteries. So he's producing huge batteries that can, advance all of our mobile technologies forwards as well, by making our different pieces of tech last longer. So yeah, all of that's super interesting. So we will delve deep into that in the future. I think we should do one whole podcast on Elon Musk, and loads of other podcasts about different separate pieces of technology here in the future on the HotCuppaTV podcast. But yes, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you all. I hope you all have enjoyed this podcast so much today. Thank you all for tuning in, and we shall see you all on the next HotCuppaTV podcast. Leave your thoughts and ideas for podcast subjects in the comments below, and we'll see you guys soon.